Imagine walking into gym class and being told to climb a 20-foot rope or you fail. No excuses, no participation trophies, just raw strength and discipline. Now, fast forward to today, kids can't even do a single pull-up, dodgeball is banned, gym class is mostly free periods, and fitness tests have been watered down to essentially nothing. So how did we go from military level training to barely breaking a sweat? And why was gym class so much better back then? I don't know if you guys have seen these videos where kids in like the 1960s are like little mini commandos. They're like, doing crazy rope climbs, they're doing like jungle gym, and everybody's lean. There's no fat kids in this school in the 1950s. Not that I'm trying to like body shame anybody, but there's a big difference. Imagine walking into gym class in 1960 and there's no yoga mats, you can't take a free period, there's no just walk the track days. You literally have to climb a 20-foot rope without using your legs. You have to perform strict pull-ups, dips, and push-ups, and not just one or two, but enough to meet a standard. Quite literally very similar to military training. You have to run a mile pretty fast. You can't just walk it. There's so many kids nowadays that are essentially morbidly obese that just slowly walk this track for the fitness test, quote unquote. These kids in the 1960s had to learn gymnastic movements like handstands. They had to do parallel bars, vaulting, essentially do actual strength drills instead of just stretching and jogging. Many of us today can't do those things. And if you couldn't do it, you had to train until you could. Essentially back then, physical education was not about participation. It was about performance. And this was not an American phenomenon solely. This was around the world. Schools treated physical fitness as a core pillar of education. Soviet schools had regimented strength and endurance training, which produced Olympic-level athletes from a pretty young age. Japanese schools integrated martial arts into their PE programs, emphasizing discipline, mobility, and coordination. In the post-World War II era, American schools modeled gym class after military-style training. Essentially, these were countries that were creating a generation of citizen soldiers. They were preparing students for real-world strength and resilience. And the result was that kids came out of high school stronger, leaner, and much more capable than they do today. And in fact, much more capable than most adults are today. But where did PE even start? Long ago, PE was not about jumping jacks or a quick game of basketball. It was actually a mirror reflecting who we are as a society. Imagine thousands of years ago, standing among your ancient Greek peers, preparing not just for athletic competition, but for life itself. Exercise for the body and music for the soul. They emphasized both development of the body and the mind, and they were adamant that a sharp mind requires a strong body. Everybody knows about Sparta. Spartan boys at just 7 years old endured brutal training to become warriors. So we can contrast this with the Athenians of Athens, whose gyms were more balanced, essentially, strength coupled with wisdom. Now, jumping ahead in time, in ancient Rome, soldiers trained relentlessly, not just for sport, but for survival, and, gladiators did as well. Civilizations essentially understood that the strength of their empire or their nation relied not solely on strategy, but also on the physical readiness of every soldier and every citizen. And as an empire fades, so too does the emphasis on physical prowess. So there's a lull in PE for centuries, actually, until the Renaissance. And then educators rediscovered all this ancient wisdom and brought it into the modern world, basically declared that a sound mind requires a sound body. There was a guy named Friedrich John, who was a passionate German guy, a nationalist, who transformed PE into essentially a powerful patriotic movement. And he believed that, gymnastics was not just exercise, it was a political statement. It was, basically this declaration of national strength. And then over in Sweden, in a similar era, there was a gentle gymnastic system that essentially brought in this obsession with wellness and holistic health and therapeutic exercise that has, been maintained until today. If we fast forward a little while, there's this movement called muscular Christianity, which is essentially something that proclaimed that true strength was not just in muscles, but in teamwork, fair play, and resilience. However, there was also another aspect of this where they wanted to make the concept of being religious and a good Christian also associated with physical strength. There was a lot of complexity to this muscular Christianity movement, but this value spread across the entire world and shaped how millions of people perceive morality, sport, and physical education today. America took all these European ideals and then blended them into a unique American instantiation of it because of our sort of different ideology. So we took rigorous gymnastics from Germany, we took sort of playful British sports, and then we put them into this unique American physical education. And then the World Wars created a startling change for the nation. We realized as a nation that our security was intimately tied to the fitness of our youth. So President Eisenhower and President Kennedy ignited really huge nationwide fitness campaigns aiming to reverse what Kennedy called the, quote, soft American. So reflecting back, physical education emerges not just as exercise, but as this interesting story of us adapting and continuously self-improving, and essentially the health of our bodies mirrors the health of our society. So what does that mean for today when kids aren't allowed to play dodgeball because we're too afraid they're gonna get hurt? And looking back to the 1960s when you have these young kids doing essentially special forces level training nowadays, what changed in the last 60 years that led to the pussification of PE? So back in 1955, 1985, there was a researcher named Dr. Hans Kraus who conducted a study comparing American kids to European kids in terms of basic strength and flexibility. And the results were devastating to Americans. 57% of American children failed basic strength and flexibility tests. Meanwhile, only 8% of European kids failed those same tests. This got the attention of President Eisenhower, who immediately created the President's Council on Physical Fitness in Sports. This was a government-backed initiative to improve youth fitness. So then, a little while later, in the early 1960s, JFK took it even further, declaring that fitness was actually a national priority. And he introduced this thing called the Presidential Fitness Test. So the Presidential Fitness Test included pull-ups, sit-ups, the shuttle run, the sit and reach, and a mile run. And let's be clear, this test was not easy. Kids weren't just graded on effort. It wasn't like you just had to show up and do, a pull-up or whatever. They had strict performance benchmarks that they actually had to hit. Here's the crazy part. In 1962, over 50% of American school children could do at least 5 pull-ups. And today, most kids cannot do a single pull-up. So how did we go from hard military-style citizen soldier training to participation trophies? There were 3 major changes that caused this decline of physical education. So first, there was a legal shift. Back in the 1990s, schools started to cut back on these mandatory fitness tests because it was seen as, quote, too hard on kids. In the, very litigation-friendly legal climate of the United States, lawsuits over injuries made schools pull back on physically demanding activities. Secondly, there were widespread budget cuts. We shifted to caring a lot more about this standardized academic tests like the SAT or the ACT or whatever. And so standardized testing became the priority, and gym class received a lot less funding, which led to fewer resources, much poorer trained instructors, a lot less rigorous PE programs, essentially. And thirdly, there was a big cultural shift that happened. We went from celebrating strength and endurance to treating physical education as an afterthought. In general, today, fitness is optional. Go to any Walmart and you'll see that certainly being fit is not mandatory based on our society's perception, how we should be. And certainly, modern gym classes are pretty low effort. It's no surprise then that youth obesity rates have skyrocketed. So back in 1960, only 4% of kids were overweight, and today it is well over 20%. I mean, let's be honest, if you took a high school gym class today and you put them through a 1960s presidential fitness test, very few of them would pass. And it's also quite likely that because they're so unhealthy and, not exposing their body to this force, that they would probably have a lot of kids that got injured just doing those basic fitness tests that everybody had to do back in the 1960s. So is the golden age of PE dead forever? Not necessarily. There's actually a growing movement to bring back real fitness in schools. You'll see this on social media as well, but more and more coaches and PE instructors and such are making kids actually do body weight training, push-ups, pull-ups, squats, that kind of thing. There's a return of these cardio benchmarks that encourage kids to work on their speed and their endurance and also develop some real athleticism. And that's exactly what kids need. The reality here is that we have a tendency towards disorder in our universe, and it's certainly true in our body. If you don't put in rigorous, meticulous effort, then you will decay. It's a thing that, was recognized by humans for thousands of years, and Plato has quite an interesting quote about it. I couldn't remember the quote, so I had to look it up. I paraphrased it in my mind, but it's lack of activity destroys the good condition of every human being, while movement and methodical physical exercise save and preserve it. The reality is that it doesn't really matter if a kid shows up for gym class. There should not be any participation rewards there. You do in fact need to develop strength, discipline, work on your health with actual effort. Now there's also another counterbalance point here, which is that I personally remember gym classes being one of the few times where I got to play with a big group of kids. So, doing things like dodgeball is incredibly fun. It's an athletic pursuit. This whole video is actually just because I have an axe to grind about why the PE programs of today have eliminated dodgeball, but no, I'm slightly kidding. Although I do love dodgeball. I'm Sam Bachvarov. I'm the editor-in-chief of Udilife magazine, where we bridge ancient wisdom with modern science to give everybody the tools to live life to the fullest. If you like this video, give it a like and let us know what you think of it in the comments. If you want more content like this, definitely subscribe to the channel. I'm super excited to announce that we've got an exclusive school community where we are doing master classes, AMAs, deep dives on all topics related to leveling up in life. We've got a ton of content specialized for entrepreneurs, for people on their fitness journey, for people that want to become parents and want to pass on the best epigenetic profile to their kids. So if any of that catches your eye, definitely go check out the school community, which is the Udilife school community. That's Udilife associated with the magazine.